Your neighbor is going to walk past your tomatoes in July and stop dead, not because you spent more money than them, not because you worked harder than them, but because you made one decision in April that they have never heard of, that no garden center will ever tell them about, and that completely eliminates the need to buy fertilizer ever again. Your plants will be darker green. Your yields will be heavier. Your soil will be richer every single year instead of more depleted. And the entire system costs exactly $0 after the first setup. This is not composting. This is not mulch. This is something older, something that fed civilizations for 4,000 years, something that was deliberately buried by the fertilizer industry the moment they figured out how to sell you bottled nitrogen. If you miss this spring window, you lose an entire growing season of free fertility that you will never get back. So let's not waste another second. Here is exactly what you need to do right now. Before I tell you what this is, I need you to understand what you have been spending money on, because the fertilizer industry has run one of the most successful marketing operations in agricultural history, and you have been paying for it every single spring without questioning it once. Walk into any garden center right now. Count the linear feet of shelf space dedicated to fertilizer, synthetic granules, organic blends, liquid concentrates, slow-release pellets, specialized tomato formulas, rose formulas, lawn formulas. The average American gardener spends $50 to $150 per year on fertilizer products. Multiply that by 10 years. That is $500 to $1,500 spent on something that plants were getting for free for millions of years before the fertilizer industry existed. Now walk outside and look at any forest, any meadow, any ecosystem that has never seen a bag of fertilizer in its entire existence. It is growing. It is thriving. It is recycling nutrients in a closed-loop system that requires zero external inputs and produces zero waste. The trees are not starving. The wildflowers are not yellow and stunted. The soil is not depleted. It is getting richer every single year. So what is happening in that forest that is not happening in your garden? That is the question the fertilizer industry does not want you to ask. Because the moment you ask it, the moment you actually understand the answer, their entire business model collapses. Here is what is happening. Every leaf that falls, every flower that fades, every stem that dies back, every root hair that sheds, every insect that expires, every piece of organic matter that drops to the forest floor is immediately colonized by soil microorganisms, bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, earthworms, and thousands of other species working in a biological chain that breaks down complex organic molecules into plant-available nutrients: nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, sulfur. Every mineral a plant needs is being cycled, released, and made available in the exact chemical forms that roots can absorb. And it is happening continuously, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, in a process so efficient and so perfectly calibrated to plant needs that no laboratory has ever been able to replicate it at scale. This is the soil food web. And once you understand it, once you see it working, you will never look at a bag of fertilizer the same way again. The fertilizer industry convinced you that plants eat chemicals. They do not. Plants eat the waste products of living microorganisms. The chemicals in fertilizer bags are shortcuts. They deliver nutrients in water-soluble forms that plant roots can absorb immediately without waiting for biological breakdown. And that immediacy, that instant availability, is precisely what makes them so profitable and so damaging at the same time. Here is what happens when you fertilize with synthetics. You pour water-soluble nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium directly into the soil. The plant roots absorb it immediately. You see fast green growth. The plant looks good. You feel successful. But underground, something catastrophic is happening that you cannot see. The sudden influx of water-soluble nutrients signals to soil microorganisms that their work is no longer needed. Why break down organic matter when free nutrients are already available in solution? Microbial populations crash. Fungal networks collapse. The entire soil food web that was cycling nutrients for free shuts down. Your soil becomes biologically dead. And now your plants are completely dependent on you to keep fertilizing them, because the free system that was feeding them has been destroyed. You just bought yourself a subscription service. Every season for the rest of your gardening life, you will need to buy fertilizer because you killed the system that was providing it for free. That is not an accident. That is the business model. The fertilizer industry does not sell you fertility. It sells you dependency. And it has been doing it so successfully for so long that most gardeners genuinely believe plants cannot grow without fertilizer. They can. They did for millions of years. And they will do it in your garden the moment you rebuild the system that feeds them. Now here is the part that changes everything. There is one group of plants that do not just participate in the soil food web. They actively construct it, they recruit it, they manage it. They enter into a biological partnership with soil bacteria so powerful, so efficient, so transformative that they can take nitrogen directly from the air, convert it into plant-available ammonia, and deposit it into the soil for free. Forever. At zero cost, with zero external inputs. These plants are called legumes, and they are the single most important fertilizer replacement strategy available to any gardener anywhere on Earth. If you do not have legumes in your garden right now, you are paying for something you could be growing for free. Let me be very clear about what I am saying. Legumes do not just tolerate poor soil, they fix it. They do not just grow in low nitrogen conditions. They create high nitrogen conditions. They do not just survive without fertilizer. They produce fertilizer while they grow. And when you cut them down and leave them in place, they release every molecule of nitrogen they fixed directly into the soil, feeding every plant around them for the entire rest of the season. This is not a gardening trick. This is agricultural science that has been understood and practiced for over 4,000 years. Crop rotation systems in ancient Mesopotamia, Rome, and China all included legumes specifically because farmers observed that the crops planted after legumes grew better, yielded more, and required less inputs. They did not know about nitrogen-fixing bacteria. They did not understand rhizobium symbiosis, but they knew legumes made soil fertile, and that knowledge built empires. Then in the early 1900s, a German chemist named Fritz Haber figured out how to synthesize ammonia from atmospheric nitrogen using high heat and pressure in an industrial process, the Haber-Bosch process. It won him a Nobel Prize. It also created the synthetic fertilizer industry. For the first time in human history, nitrogen fertilizer could be manufactured in factories and sold in bags. Farmers no longer needed to rotate legumes into their fields. They could plant the same cash crop year after year and simply fertilize it with synthetics. Yields exploded, profits soared, and within 50 years, the traditional practice of rotating legumes into cropping systems had nearly disappeared from industrial agriculture. What had worked for 4,000 years was replaced in a single generation. The knowledge was not lost. It was buried, deliberately, by an industry that had just figured out how to monetize something nature had been providing for free. And here is the part that should make you genuinely angry. By 1960, chemical companies were running full-page magazine ads telling farmers that crop rotation was old-fashioned and inefficient. One Monsanto ad from 1962 showed a farmer throwing away a bag of clover seed with the headline, "Why waste good land on cover crops when chemistry can do it better?" Within one generation, knowledge that had sustained agriculture for 4,000 years was labeled backwards. That was not education, that was erasure, and it worked. That same industry then spent the next 70 years convincing home gardeners, people growing food in their own backyards for their own tables, that they needed to buy the same products that industrial farms were buying. Miracle Grow, Osmocote, Scott's. Every single product marketed to home gardeners is based on the same synthetic nitrogen chemistry developed for industrial-scale agriculture. You do not need it. You never needed it. And the moment you plant legumes, you will prove that to yourself in one growing season. Here is exactly how the system works, because once you see the biology, you will understand why this is not optional, why this is not experimental, why this is the single smartest decision you will make in your garden this year. Legume roots, beans, peas, clover, vetch, alfalfa, lupin, and dozens of other species exude chemical signals into the soil. Those signals attract a specific type of soil bacteria called rhizobium. When rhizobium bacteria encounter a legume root, they infect it. That sounds alarming. It is not. This is a symbiotic infection. The bacteria colonize the root tissue and form visible structures called nodules. Inside those nodules, the bacteria begin converting atmospheric nitrogen, N2, the most abundant gas in the air you are breathing right now, into ammonia, NH3, a form of nitrogen that plants can use. This process is called biological nitrogen fixation, and it is one of the most energy-efficient chemical reactions in all of biology. The bacteria get carbohydrates from the plant. The plant gets nitrogen from the bacteria. Both benefit. This is not parasitism. This is partnership, and it happens automatically the moment you put a legume seed in the ground. Here is what that means in practical terms for your garden. 1 square yard of clover, grown for a single season, can fix 5 to 10 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet. That is equivalent to roughly 2 to 4 pounds of synthetic nitrogen fertilizer. At current prices, that is $10 to $20 worth of fertilizer produced by a plant that costs you nothing after the initial seed purchase. Scale that across your entire garden. A 20 by 20 foot garden bed is 400 square feet. Plant clover as a cover crop or interplant it with your vegetables. By the end of the season, that bed has accumulated the nitrogen equivalent of $8 to $16 worth of synthetic fertilizer without you spending a single dollar. Multiply that by 10 years. You just saved $80 to $160 on fertilizer from one decision, and that is conservative. Most gardeners spend far more. Now here is where it gets even better. When you cut down the legume and leave it in place, chop and drop method, the plant tissue breaks down and releases that nitrogen into the soil. But the roots, the part you cannot see, stay in the ground. And those roots are covered in nodules, tiny nitrogen-rich structures that decompose slowly and feed your soil for months. You are not just fertilizing this season. You are building fertility that lasts. Compare that to what happens when you use synthetic fertilizer. You open the bag. You sprinkle it on the soil. You water it in. The nutrients dissolve immediately. The plant absorbs some of it. But here is the part the bag does not mention. Studies show that 40 to 60% of applied synthetic nitrogen is lost to leaching, volatilization, or runoff before the plant ever uses it. You are paying for nutrients that wash away in the first heavy rain. You are paying for nitrogen that evaporates into the air as ammonia gas. You are paying for phosphorus that binds to soil particles and becomes unavailable. And you are paying for it every single season because none of it stays in the soil. Legume-fixed nitrogen does not leach. It is bound in organic matter. It releases slowly as microorganisms break down plant tissue. It stays in the soil food web. It cycles. It builds. And every season, your soil gets richer instead of more depleted. That is the difference between feeding your plants and feeding your soil. One creates dependency. The other creates fertility. Now here are 5 legume strategies that work in different parts of your garden. Each one solves a different problem, and every single one of them eliminates fertilizer costs permanently. Strategy 1. Crimson clover as a fall-planted cover crop. This is the highest impact, lowest effort fertility strategy available to any vegetable gardener in USDA zones 6 through 9. Plant it in late summer or early fall after you pull out your tomatoes, peppers, squash, and beans. Broadcast the seed across the bare soil. Rake it in lightly. Water once. Then you walk away. Crimson clover germinates in 7 to 10 days. It grows slowly through fall. It stays green all winter, even under snow. In early spring, before soil temperatures hit 50 degrees F, it explodes into growth. By late April or early May, it is 12 to 18 inches tall, covered in brilliant red flowers that pollinators swarm. And underground, the roots are packed with nitrogen-fixing nodules. You cut it down. You leave it on the soil surface as mulch, or you turn it under lightly. 2 weeks later, it has broken down into dark, rich, nitrogen-loaded organic matter. You plant your tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, whatever you want directly into that bed, and you do not fertilize once. The clover fed your soil. Your soil feeds your plants. You just eliminated an entire season of fertilizer purchases from one fall seeding decision. Strategy 2. Bush beans interplanted with tomatoes and peppers. Most gardeners plant tomatoes in rows with bare soil or mulch between the plants. That bare soil is wasted fertility potential. Plant bush beans in the gaps. The beans fix nitrogen while they grow. They produce edible pods you harvest and eat. And when the bean plants finish producing, you cut them down at soil level and leave the roots in place. The tomatoes and peppers, both heavy nitrogen feeders, are now growing in soil that is actively being fertilized by decomposing bean roots covered in nitrogen nodules. You just turned your vegetable garden into a self-fertilizing system, and you did it while harvesting food from both crops simultaneously. Strategy 3. White clover as a living mulch under fruit trees. This is the most elegant, most permanent, most low-maintenance fertility system you can install in any home orchard or landscape planting. White clover, Trifolium repens, is a low-growing, spreading perennial legume hardy in zones 3 through 10. It stays under 6 inches tall. It tolerates foot traffic. It stays green all season. It flowers continuously from late spring through fall, and it fixes nitrogen year-round. Plant it once under your apple, pear, peach, cherry, or plum trees. It establishes in one season, and then it works for you for the next 10 to 20 years without replanting. You mow it a few times a season to keep it low. Every time you mow, the clippings break down and release nitrogen. The roots are constantly cycling nitrogen into the soil. The tree absorbs it. The fruit gets sweeter. The yields get heavier. And you never buy fertilizer for that tree again. Strategy 4. Hairy vetch planted in pathways. Most gardens have pathways between beds. Those pathways are either bare soil, wood chips, or gravel. All 3 options are missed opportunities. Plant hairy vetch, Vicia villosa, in your pathways. It is a cold, hardy annual legume that grows aggressively through fall and winter in zones 4 through 9. It fixes massive amounts of nitrogen. And when you cut it down in spring, you use the biomass as mulch on your beds. You just turned your pathways into a fertilizer production zone. Strategy 5. Perennial ground cover legumes for permanent beds. If you have perennial beds, asparagus, rhubarb, berries, or ornamental plantings, you can install a permanent nitrogen-fixing ground cover that works for decades without replanting. The best option for most American gardens is bird's foot trefoil, Lotus corniculatus. It is a low-growing perennial legume hardy in zones 3 through 9. It tolerates poor soil, drought, and shade better than clover. It stays under 12 inches tall. It produces bright yellow flowers all summer, and it fixes nitrogen continuously, year after year, for 10 to 15 years or more. Plant it once between your asparagus rows, around your berry bushes, or under your perennial flowers. It establishes in one season, and then it feeds your soil forever. Now stop for a second. I want you to actually do something. Go grab your last fertilizer receipt, or pull up your bank statement and search for the garden center charges from last spring. Add them up. What did you spend? $50, $100, more. Now multiply that number by 5 years. That is the number you have been conditioned to think is normal. That is the number the fertilizer industry has trained you to accept. And here is what makes it worse. You are still going to spend that same amount next year unless you make a different decision right now. The 5 strategies I just gave you cost less than $25 total to set up. And after year 1, most of them cost $0 because they self-seed. You are one Amazon order away from never buying fertilizer again. Let that sink in for a second. Now let me address the question I know you are thinking. If this works so well, why is not everyone doing it? Why are garden centers not promoting legumes as fertilizer replacements? Why do gardening videos never mention this? The answer is economic structure, not conspiracy. The fertilizer industry in the United States alone is worth approximately $25 billion annually. That includes synthetic fertilizers, organic fertilizers, soil amendments, and specialty blends. Companies like Scott's Miracle-Gro, Vigoro, Jobs, and Espoma depend entirely on you buying fertilizer every single season. Their business model is built on recurring purchases. You run out of fertilizer, you go back to the store, you buy more. Revenue flows predictably, quarterly earnings are stable, shareholders are happy. Now imagine what happens if millions of home gardeners stop buying fertilizer because they planted clover. Revenue drops, earnings fall, share prices decline. That is not hypothetical. That is exactly what would happen. So the industry does not promote legumes. It promotes products. Garden centers do not sell clover seed in the fertilizer aisle. They sell it in the cover crop section, if they carry it at all. And most big box stores do not carry it because there is no profit margin in a product you only buy once. Gardening influencers and YouTube channels do not talk about legumes because fertilizer companies sponsor content. They send free products. They pay for ads. They fund collaborations. A channel that tells you to stop buying fertilizer and plant clover instead does not get sponsorship deals. The economic incentives are aligned against this information reaching you, but the information is not hidden. It is just buried under marketing. Every university extension service in the country publishes guides on cover cropping and green manures. The USDA has entire databases on nitrogen-fixing plants. The science is published, peer-reviewed, and freely available, but nobody is spending advertising dollars to make sure you see it, because nobody profits when you grow your own fertility. This video exists because I do not take sponsorships from fertilizer companies. I do not sell fertilizer. I do not make money when you buy products. I make videos when you subscribe, watch, and engage. That alignment matters. It changes what I can say and what I prioritize. And what I prioritize is information that saves you money, builds soil health, and makes you less dependent on products you do not need. If that resonates with you, subscribe right now. This channel is built for gardeners who want to understand systems, not follow trends. Now here are the 3 critical steps that determine whether everything you plant this season succeeds or struggles. Most gardening advice skips all 3 of them completely. Step 1. Inoculate your legume seeds before planting. Rhizobium bacteria are often present in healthy soil, but not always in high enough numbers to guarantee effective nodulation. Inoculant is a powder containing live rhizobium bacteria specific to the legume species you are planting. You coat the seeds with inoculant immediately before sowing. The bacteria colonize the roots as soon as the seed germinates. Nodulation happens faster. Nitrogen fixation starts earlier. Your results improve dramatically. Inoculant costs $5 to $10 per package. One package treats several pounds of seed. It is a one-time cost that ensures the system works at maximum efficiency. Do not skip this step. It is the difference between good results and exceptional results. Step 2. Cut legumes before they set seed unless you want them to self-seed. Legumes are most nitrogen-rich when they are in full flower or just beginning to set pods. That is peak biomass for fertility. If you let them go to full seed maturity, the plant pulls nitrogen out of the leaves and stems and concentrates it in the seeds. You lose nitrogen to the soil. Cut them at peak bloom or early pod set. That is when you get maximum nitrogen release. The exception is if you want them to self-seed. In that case, let a few plants go to full seed maturity. The rest, cut early. Step 3. Leave the roots in the ground always. When you cut down a legume, you are tempted to pull the whole plant out, roots and all. Do not. The roots are where the nodules are. The nodules are where the nitrogen is. Pull the roots and you remove the nitrogen you spent the entire season accumulating. Cut the plant at soil level. Leave the roots to decompose in place. As they break down, they release nitrogen slowly and feed the next crop. This is not optional. This is how the system works. Every time you pull a legume root out of the ground, you are throwing away free fertilizer. Stop doing it. Before you plant a single legume this season, I want you to test something. Dig up a small section of soil from your garden bed. Look at it. What do you see? Is it dark and crumbly? Is it full of earthworms? Or is it light, dusty, and lifeless? If your soil looks dead, it is because you have been feeding your plants and starving your soil. Synthetic fertilizers feed plants directly. They bypass the soil food web, and over time, that kills the biology that makes soil fertile. Legumes rebuild that biology. They feed the microorganisms. The microorganisms feed the plants, and the soil gets richer every season. That is regenerative agriculture. And you can do it in a backyard garden just as effectively as a farmer can do it on 1,000 acres. Let me tell you what happened to a viewer who emailed me 6 months ago. She planted crimson clover in her raised beds in October 2023. She was skeptical. She had been using organic fertilizer for 5 years, and her tomatoes always did well. She figured the clover was an experiment, something to try on one bed while she fertilized the others like normal. Spring 2024 came. The clover bed exploded with red flowers in April. She cut it down, let it decompose for 2 weeks, and planted tomatoes. By mid-June, those tomatoes were so dark green, so vigorous, so different from the fertilized beds that her neighbor asked if she was using some kind of illegal growth hormone. She was not using any fertilizer at all. The clover did that. And when she harvested in August, the clover bed out-yielded her fertilized beds by 30%. She spent $0 on fertility. Her neighbor spent $60 on organic tomato fertilizer and got worse results. That is what this system does when you actually use it. Now I want to address the skeptics, because I know what some of you are thinking. This sounds too good to be true. If it worked this well, everyone would be doing it. Here is the response. Everyone was doing it for 4,000 years. Crop rotation systems in ancient Mesopotamia included legumes. Roman agriculture rotated beans and peas with grains. Medieval European three-field rotation systems included a legume year. Chinese, Indian, and African agricultural systems all incorporated nitrogen-fixing plants. This was universal practice. It worked everywhere. It worked for everyone. Then synthetic fertilizers were invented, and within 50 years the practice was abandoned, not because it stopped working, but because something faster became available. Synthetic fertilizers give you instant results. Legumes take a season. In a market-driven agriculture system optimized for speed and yield, the slow option lost. But the slow option builds soil, the fast option depletes it. And 100 years into the synthetic fertilizer era, we are seeing the consequences. Soil degradation, nutrient runoff, dead zones in the Gulf of Mexico from fertilizer pollution. The fast option was not better, it was faster, and faster is not the same as sustainable. In your garden, you do not need faster. You need sustainable. You need soil that gets better every year. You need a system that works without constant inputs. Legumes give you that, fertilizer does not. The economics speak for themselves. Crimson clover seed, $3.05 per pound. 1 pound covers 1,1500 SQFT. You need $1.02 worth for a 200 SQFT bed. That $1.02 replaces $15.30 of spring fertilizer. White clover, $4.06 per pound. 1 pound seeds, 4,000 SQFT. Under a fruit tree, 300 SQFT, you need $2 worth. That eliminates 20 years of $10.20 annual fertilizer purchases. That is $200 400 saved per tree. Hairy vetch, $3.05 per pound. 1 pound seeds, 500 SQFT. Pathways totaling 200 SQFT need $2 worth, replacing $30.50 in mulch and fertilizer. Bird's foot trefoil, $6.08 per pound. 1 pound seeds, 2,300 SQFT. An 80 SQFT perennial bed needs $2.03 worth, replacing $150 to $25 in fertilizer over 10-15 years. Total setup cost for all 5 strategies, $15.25. Annual fertilizer savings, $50 First year ROI, 200-600%. After year 1, most self-seed and your cost drops to 0. That is not gardening advice. That is wealth creation. If this video just showed you one strategy that you will use this season, I want you to do one thing right now. Subscribe. Not at the end of the video. Now, because gardeners who subscribe in the middle of a video are the ones who actually implement what they learn. They are the ones whose gardens look completely different 2 seasons from now. They are the ones who stop spending money on products they do not need. Be that gardener, hit subscribe. It costs you nothing. And it means information like this finds you every single week. This channel is built for gardeners who want systems that work, soil that builds, and information that saves money. If that resonates with you, hit the bell so the next video actually finds you. Because the gardeners who subscribe today are the ones whose yards look completely different by this time next year. Be one of them. One last thing before we finish. Leave the seed head standing. When your crimson clover blooms, when your hairy vetch flowers, do not cut it all down immediately. Let some of it go to seed. Let the bees work it. Let the flowers mature. Let the seeds drop, because those seeds are next year's fertility. Those seeds are next year's cost savings. Those seeds are the system perpetuating itself without you having to replant, rebuy, or reinvest. That is regenerative gardening. That is food sovereignty. That is what it looks like when you stop depending on products and start depending on biology. Your garden can feed itself. Your soil can fertilize itself. And you can sit on your porch in July watching your tomatoes grow darker and heavier than your neighbors, knowing you did not spend a single dollar on fertilizer. That is not just gardening. That is freedom. Subscribe right now if you are ready for that. And go plant something that fixes nitrogen. Your soil will thank you. Your wallet will thank you. And next July, your neighbors will stop and ask what you are doing differently. And you will smile, because you will know exactly what they do not.